In the chaos of dawn over Virginia's coast, NATO cruise missiles streak toward Naval Station Norfolk. Explosions ripple across the horizon as missiles impact runways and fuel depots in fiery bursts. French Rafale jets escort paratroopers dropping onto highways amid exploding defenses and debris. U.S. Patriot batteries launch interceptors, lighting the sky as F-22 Raptors scramble from bases. A French amphibious ship takes a submarine torpedo hit, troops scrambling as it lists violently. Underwater shock waves propagate, hull breaches flooding compartments in a cascade of destruction. Abrams tanks surge forward in a massive mechanized counteroffensive, crushing NATO beachheads near Norfolk. Tank shells detonate on clustered enemy positions, sending shockwaves through marshy terrain. Apache helicopters strafe retreating Leopard tanks, while HIMARS rockets pound rear supply lines relentlessly. Rocket barrages erupt in synchronized volleys, igniting ammunition trucks in massive fireballs. NATO's beachhead collapses under American divisions, paratroopers surrendering amid jammed communications. Captured banners fall into the mud as encircled forces raise white flags under duress. HMS Prince of Wales erupts in flames from a missile strike, forcing NATO's fleet into desperate retreat. Secondary explosions chain react across the carrier deck, crew evacuating in organized panic. September 2024 2025 dawns in the Atlantic Ocean as Operation Iron Reprisal launches full-scale strikes. 31 NATO nations attempt to breach America's heavily defended homeland across vast oceans. The conflict begins not with gunfire, but a deep fracture in long-standing alliance structures. After withdrawing from European bases, the United States exits NATO entirely and severs shared systems. Satellites, intelligence feeds, and GPS networks vanish, leaving NATO allies in operational darkness. NATO responds swiftly, aiming not for occupation, but targeted disruption of U.S. command centers. The objective focuses on disarming key forces and compelling negotiations before escalation spirals. Crossing 3,000 miles of ocean without American logistics proves an unprecedented challenge. Without U.S. satellites or airlift capabilities, NATO's coalition strike becomes history's most ambitious. Allies who trained together for decades now turn familiar tactics against their former partner. Though NATO formed as a defensive pact, this scenario crosses into hypothetical offensive territory. Just unlikely in reality, this exploration examines potential outcomes of such a fractured alliance. The mission demands forcing U.S. surrender while minimizing mass civilian casualties through precision. No nuclear options or city-leveling strikes. Emphasis lies on speed, pressure, and surgical operations. NATO issues a 96-hour warning, activating evacuation protocols across targeted coastal regions. Troops mobilize rapidly as entire naval groups deploy under strict radio silence protocols. Without U.S. support, NATO navigates blindly, relying on Europe's slower Galileo system for positioning. Galileo proves easier to jam and untested in combat compared to the robust American GPS network. NATO retains some capabilities, but they pale against the comprehensive U.S. intelligence web lost. Absent live drone feeds and global logistics, operations suffer from degraded situational awareness. Much of NATO's advanced equipment, including F-35s and Blackhawks, depends on U.S. parts and software. F-35s can still share data internally, but without fused satellite and radar intelligence, effectiveness drops. Each sortie without spare parts maintenance erodes the fleet's operational readiness over time. Staging operations commence in Greenland, Iceland, Azores, and Canada for transatlantic positioning. Troops deploy to remote airstrips while cargo ships load fuel, ammunition, armor, and essential supplies. Convoys stretch across the Atlantic, tightly packed and escorted by destroyers for protection. The invasion divides into three thrusts. Main force targets Virginia's Norfolk Naval Station. A secondary force strikes Florida's Panhandle to seize Eglin Air Force Base and fracture defenses. A northern push advances from Canada into Maine and Michigan using pre-positioned European troops. NATO destroyers and amphibious ships escort waves of cargo vessels reliant on patchwork satellites. Degraded ISR capabilities reduce missile accuracy, slow reactions, and complicate coordination efforts. Before sunrise, cruise missiles illuminate the East Coast, striking air bases from Virginia to Georgia. RAF Typhoons and French Rafales escort paratroopers landing on major highways in the confusion. Special forces raid a missile site in North Dakota, while helicopters assault Norfolk beachheads. The fleet advances low and fast to seize ports, crater docks, and establish inland corridors. U.S. Patriots intercept missiles as Aegis destroyers engage threats, and F-22s dominate the skies. The 82nd Airborne secures roads, while the 101st Air Assault lifts from Kentucky bases swiftly. Marines deploy anti-ship missiles along coasts as the exposed French vessel falls to submarines. HIMARS launch GPS-guided rockets into landing zones. Apaches targeting stalled NATO vehicles. Coastal batteries fire naval strike missiles, sinking amphibious transports and drowning troops. B-1 bombers from Texas unleash anti-ship missiles on convoys far beyond NATO's strike range. American armor mobilizes via rail from Georgia, Kentucky, and Texas using domestic infrastructure. Interior lines allow U.S. forces to move faster, fight closer, and resupply more efficiently than invaders. NATO's cyber attacks buckle East Coast infrastructure, spoofing GPS and causing power outages. Commercial drones veer off, rail networks glitch. Emergency systems flood with false calls. U.S. Cyber Command isolates networks quickly, restoring data via backup satellites and hardened lines. American counter-cyber operations sever undersea cables, degrading Galileo's signals near battlefields. NATO drone feeds darken, satellites stall, and command centers lose contact with forward units. U.S. missiles strike precisely at hidden troops, igniting fuel depots and halting artillery reloads. Virginia's marshy coastline and Appalachian barriers channel NATO into predictable, vulnerable paths. Midwest openness exposes columns to U.S. bombers and drones, while bridges and roads get cratered. America's intact rail and road systems enable rapid redeployments from coast to coast in hours. NATO loses cargo ships nightly to submarines, crews abandoning tankers mid-ocean in despair. Without securing deep-water ports, NATO fragments, unable to sustain armor or fuel pipelines. U.S. National Guard floods interiors, outnumbering invaders as NATO's munitions and fuel dwindle. Divisions like 1st Cavalry and 3rd Infantry surge toward Norfolk in coordinated assaults. 82nd Airborne flanks north while Marines hold south, HIMARS devastating NATO's rear echelons. French Leclerc and German Leopard tanks clash fiercely but lack air support and logistics. British paratroopers push seaward amid jammed comms, facing inevitable encirclement and capture. Florida positions fall, northern advances retreat to Canada, leaving troops cut off and surrendering. At sea, Charles de Gaulle disables under drone swarms as remaining ships flee pursued by submarines. The United States emerges victorious, holding the field as NATO's invasion crumbles decisively. Reliance on American technology, extended supply lines, and unforgiving geography sealed NATO's fate. Victory might have required seizing ports, neutralizing air power, and forcing surrender within days. Instead, fleet losses, eroded resolve, and strategic missteps lead to total operational collapse. Diplomats reconvene amid ceasefires, pondering the scars on a once unbreakable alliance. Nutlin. Battlefield surveys reveal wreckage strewn across beaches, a testament to defensive resolve. Postmortems highlight overreach, from tech dependencies to underestimating interior advantages. Hypothetical pivots emerge. Earlier cyber dominance or bolder initial landings could shift tides. Geopolitical ripples extend from economic shocks to realigned global power dynamics. Evacuation drills in coastal cities underscore the human cost of fractured alliances. Joint exercise footage, once symbols of unity, now repurposed for offensive simulations. Article 5 invocations echo hollowly, reframed as a desperate bid for alliance survival. Admirals chart risky transatlantic routes, factoring in weather and submarine threats. Technicians calibrate Galileo receivers, compensating for vulnerabilities over oceanic distances. Radar operators scan empty skies, missing fused data streams that once painted full battle spaces. Mechanics inventory stockpiles, rationing critical components for initial assault phases. Pilots brief on degraded modes, practicing isolated formations without full intelligence. Thule Air Base hums with arrivals. Tents pitching against Arctic winds for temporary hubs. Forklifts stack pallets methodically, securing loads against the rough Atlantic crossing. Sonar pings echo as escorts sweep for submerged threats, maintaining vigilant formation. Planners allocate resources, prioritizing amphibious assets for the pivotal East Coast assault. Gulf Coast scouts map insertion points, avoiding known U.S. coastal surveillance networks. Joint patrols transition to offensive maneuvers, leveraging existing border infrastructure.